It does feel like it's dark.
Doesn't that feel better?
Yeah, it was. I felt like it felt like that when we were doing photos earlier too. I don't know what it is. Also, this feels lighter than normal.
Well,
This is always
darker outside.
It's because it's dark.
Yeah, I feel like it is.
All right, you ready?
Oh yeah, like mic's on. Cool.
Yeah, they'll move.
Yep.
Yeah. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom to those of you who are in the lobby that can hopefully hear my voice. Hey. We'll give folks another minute to wander in. What do you think?
Yes.
Yes. Especially considering your mother's not here yet. Shabbat Shalom to any folks joining us live on YouTube. All right, welcome. It's so nice to see everybody together here as we welcome Shabbat. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kathy Kaplan. I am the director of the religious school and an FOL, that would be friend of Leslie. And I also have with me tonight Eli Gartenberg. For a split second. Yeah, it happens. Anyway, I hope you all can grab one of the small red book in your place. There is our Siddur for the evening, and our service is going to begin on page 11.
Lechunirana, 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 ladonai. Lechunirana, 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 ladonai. Naria, Naria, Litzor Yishenu Nekadma Fanav Betoda. Naria, Naria, Litzor Yishenu Bizmirot Naria Lo. Lechuniranina, 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 Ladonai. Lechuniranina, 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 Ladonai.
You may continue silently on to page 12. Arba'im shana akut bedor va'omar am to'eh levavhem v'hem lo yidu derachai asher nishbati ve'api im yivahun el menuchati. Before we continue, Eli, we completely forgot that we can actually unmask.
We can't.
And my glasses are fogging up, so we're going to do that for the two of us on the Bima. All right, at the top of page 13, we'll continue our service.
Shiru Ladonai,
Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz,
Shiru Ladonai, Shiru Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Hu Shemo, Basru Miyom Liyom Yeshuato, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Hu Shemo, Basru Miyom Liyom Yeshuato.
Continue through to the end, to the mark on page 14.
Yismehu Hashamayim,
Hashamayim,
Yismehu Hashamayim,
Hashamayim,
Yismehu Hashamayim, V'tagel Haaretz. Yismehu Hashamayim,
Hashamayim,
Yismehu Hashamayim,
Hashamayim,
Yismehu Hashamayim, V'tagel Haaretz. Yiram Hayam, Yiram Hayam, Yiram Hayam, Ulo,
Yiram Hayam, Yiram Hayam, Yiram Hayam, Umelo.
Lifnei Adonai kiva kiva lishpot haaretz yishpot tevel b'tzedek ve'amim b'munato. We continue our service on page 15. We read silently through to page 16.
Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, O Yishrei Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, O Yishrei Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, O Yishrei Lev Simcha. O Yishrei Lev Simcha. Or Zarua, Lat Tzadik, O Yishrei Lev Simcha. O Yishrei Lev Simcha.
Or Zaru ala tzadik o yishrei lev simcha simchut tzadikim badonai v'hodu lezecher chodsho. Continue at the top of page 17, silently through to page 18.
Zamru ladonai bechinor, bechinor vekol zimra, b'chatzotzrot vekol shofar, ha'ariu l'fnei hamelech Adonai, Yiram hayam umlo, tevel v'yoshvei v'neharot, imcha uchav yahad, Harim Yiranenu, Lifnei Adonai kiva, kiva lishpot haaretz, yishpot tevel b'tzedek, v'yamim b'mei sharim, Yiram hayam umlo, tevel v'yoshvei v'neharot, Imcha uchad yahad harim yiranenu.
Lifnei Adonai kiva kiva lishpot haaretz yishpot tevel b'tzedek v'yamim b'mei sharim. Continue on page 19, silently through to the bottom of page 20.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lechar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'hishtachavu lechar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu.
Continue at the top of page 21. Please rise as you are able for Mizmor LeDavid.
Mizmor LeDavid, Havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, Havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, Havu l'Adonai kivod shemo, Ishtachavu l'Adonai b'hadrat kodesh, Kol Adonai al hamayim, El hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai hoshev esh, Vayishaber Adonai b'chazrat kohanon, Vayarkidem kemo egel, Lechanon v'sirion, Kimovain Remim, Kol Adonai Hotet Lachot Ish, Kol Adonai Yahil Midbar, Yahil Adonai Midbar Kadesh, Kol Adonai Yeholel Ayalot, Vayehesod Ye'arot, Uchechalo Kulo Omer Kavod, Kulo Omer Kavod, Adonai Lamavo Yashav, Vayeshev Adonai Melech Leolam, Adonai Oz Liam Oitin, Adonai Yivarech et Amo Vashalom.
You may be seated. We now prepare to welcome the Shabbat bride with Lecha Dodi on page 23. We're going to do the first 3 verses on page 23 and then the last 3 verses on page 25. And it is traditional in that last verse that we rise and face the entrance to welcome the Shabbat bride.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad, Hishmiyanu el hamyuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shemo tiferet l'hila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu b'nelcha, Ki hi mekor habracha, Merosh mikadem nesucha, Sof ma'aseh v'mashavat gila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Mikdash melech ir melucha, Kumi titzei mitoch hafecha, Rav lach shevet ve'emecha bacha, V'hu yachamol alaychema. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Vayahu l'shisha shosayich, V'rachaku kol mevalich, Yasis alayich Elohayich, Kimsos hatan akala. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Yaminu smol tifrotzi, V'et Adonai ta'aritzi, Al yadish ben partzi, V'nismicha v'nagila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Bo'vi v'shalom ateret bala, Gam b'simcha v'sohala, Toch emunei am segula, Boi chala, boi chala. Lecha dodi, lecha dodi likrat kala. Pnei Shabbat nekavela. Lecha dodi likrat kala. Pnei Shabbat nekavela.
You may be seated. At this point in our service, we traditionally welcome any mourners who might be in the week of Shiva, and it's become our practice since we've been doing this on YouTube as well as in person to do that each week, as we never know who might be with us. So if anyone is with us, either in spirit or in person, who is in the week of mourning, may the divine comfort you along with all the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem, and may you find comfort from heaven. We'll continue our service at the top of page 27.
Mizmor shir leyom hashabbat, tov lehodod la'Adonai, ulzamer l'shimcha elyon, ulzamer l'shimcha elyon, lehagid baboker hasdecha, ve'emunacha baleilot, alei asor ve'alei navel, alei higayon bechinor, mizmor shir liyom hashabbat, tov lehodod la'Adonai, ulzamer l'shimcha elyon, ulzamer l'shimcha elyon.
Continue silently through to the mark on page 28.
Tzadika tamar yifrach, ke'erez balvananon yizkeh shetulim beveit Adonai behatzrot Eloheinu yafrihu. Od yenuhun b'seva, deshenim v'rananim, yiyu l'hagid, ki yashar Adonai, turi v'lo avlat habo.
We'll read page 29 on the left side of the page in the English, responsively, starting with Eli.
Adonai is sovereign, robed in splendor, girded in strength. The earth stands firm, not to be dislodged. From earliest time you were enthroned. You are eternal.
The rivers rise up, Adonai. The rivers raise up their roar. The rivers raise up their waves. Above the roar of the vast sea and the majestic breakers of the ocean, Adonai stands supreme in the heavens.
In your house, beautiful in its holiness, your testimonies endure, Adonai, for all time.
If we have any mourners or those observing yahrzeit, you may rise for the mourner's Kaddish on page 30. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, V'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael v'agala uv'izman kari v'imru Amen. Yehe shmei rabba mevarach le'olam omei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudasha v'rechu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru, amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. You may be seated. And Eli, you may be seated for a few minutes if you'd like. It's traditional in between our Kabbalat Shabbat service and our regular Mariv service to have a little bit of learning. And he already wrote one Devar and didn't want to write another one. I don't know what's up with that. So here we go. Shabbat Shalom. Many of you are here tonight to celebrate the Bar Mitzvah of Eli. As I started to think about what I wanted to share tonight, I certainly did not want to overlap with the wonderful Devar that you will all hear tomorrow morning. Eli will be talking about, you might have guessed it, numbers. So tonight, we're going to talk about language and letters. And we know that language matters, right, in everything that we do. French might be the best language for romance. German might be a fantastic language for philosophy. Hebrew, we here in this room, tend to think is the language of godliness. Specifically, we're going to talk about the letters in Vayikra, which is the name of this week's Parsha. The word Vayikra, when it's printed in the scroll, well, in general, forget being printed in the scroll, it ends with the letter Aleph. But when it's in the Torah scroll, when the Sofer writes a scroll, the Aleph at the end of this one word is written much smaller than the other letters. No one really knows why it was originally written like that, but now it's a tradition that all Sofers follow. Like you're never going to open a Torah scroll that doesn't have that little Aleph in it. So I'd like to share one of the many ideas surrounding this letter. That one letter, grammatically, changes the word Vayikar to Vayikra. The root of those words, and they have the same root, means to call or to meet up, right? So although the two words have very similar meaning, the Midrash tells us that the word Vayikra, with the Aleph, implies a loving, close, and intentional relationship or communication between two people. But the word Vayikar, without the Aleph, implies almost an accident, as if you were at the grocery store and you run into an acquaintance, right? So it's the same connection, right? Two people meeting or running across each other, but with a different sense of connection and intent. So it's said that when Moses was putting the words of the Torah to the scroll, he wrote the word without the Aleph. In his intense modesty, he wanted to make sure that it didn't seem that he himself had a particularly intimate relationship with God. He wanted to make it seem like he was just like everybody else and his relationship wasn't any more special. God felt otherwise and insisted that God include the Aleph. But they compromised and made it smaller than the other letters. Now, let's be real. If God told Moses to write the letter Aleph, God gets the letter. Right? The words came, through the yad of Moshe, but from God. So why would God compromise in this situation, right? So it suggests that compromise is right there at the core, right there at the essence of relationships. Every good relationship includes compromise, or else it turns one-sided. And if it's one-sided and one side always gives in, resentment builds and unhealthy energy develops. It's also, in those two words, the difference between purpose and accident. God wants God's role in our lives to be purposeful, not accidental. Acts of wrongdoing can take us away from God. So the rest of the Parsha talks about all these sacrifices that were made for various sins between people and God, sins between people and other people. But any kind of wrongdoing takes us away from God. Sacrifices were supposed to repair the gap and bring people back into a good, intentional relationship with God. Although we don't offer burnt sacrifices anymore, anytime we give up something for a larger purpose, it is a sacrifice. We sacrifice our money to give tzedakah and help those in need. We give of our time to help other people when we can help them in more physical ways than just through money. And God wants those acts to be intentional and thoughtful. Life does sometimes feel as if it is filled with accidental occurrences that are thrown in our path, like 30-degree weather in late March. But if we are intentional in the way we move through the world, those accidents can be remedied and we can connect with one another and with God in a close, intentional relationship. So for Eli, although he probably already knows this because I know he did the research, Vayikra has the most letters and words of any of the weekly Torah portions in the book of Leviticus, although not the most verses. It is made up of 6,222 Hebrew letters, 1,673 Hebrew words, 111 verses, and 215 lines in a Torah scroll. Shabbat Shalom. Come on back. All right, we are going to continue our service on page 39A with the Baruch Hu, and as you are able, please rise.
Baruch Hu Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
You may be seated.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Ahavta Torah u'mitzvot hukim u'mishpatim otanu limadita Al kein Adonai Eloheinu v'shokveinu u'v'kumeinu nasiya bechukecha V'nizmach divrei Toratecha u'v'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu v'yorech yameinu v'yorech yameinu u'vahem negeh yomam v'layla yomam v'layla
V'ahavatcha chal tasir mimenu le'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev avo Yisrael. We continue at the top of page 41.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha B'chol avacha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzvacha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'leitecha u'v'leftecha b'derech U'shofbecha u'v'kumecha u'shartam leot al yadecha v'hayu latotavot b'neinecha u'v'tavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'v'yisharecha.
Continue silently on through to the bottom of page 42.
Adonai Elohechem emet.
Continue silently through 43 and gather again at the top of page 44.
U'malchuto b'ratzon kiblu aleihem Moshe u'Miriam uvnei Yisrael lechanu shira v'simcha rabba v'amru chulam Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai Mi chamocha nedar ba'kodesh Norah tehilot osef elah Malchucha ra'u v'anecha bokeyam lifnei Moshe Ze'eli anu v'yamru Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed V'ne'emar kifadad Adonai et Yaakov ugala ma'yid hazek mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael.
Continue to the top of page 45. We begin silently.
Ufros Aleinu Slukat Shomecha, Baruch Atah Adonai, Hapore Sukat Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Amo Yisrael, Hapore Sukat Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Amo Yisrael, Ve'al Yerushalayim.
Please rise as you are able for Vishamru at the top of page 46.
Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, lidorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, lidorotam berit olam. V'nu v'en b'nei Yisrael, ot hi li'olam, ot hi li'olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, lidorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz, v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, lidorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, lidorotam berit olam.
Please remain standing. We continue with the Hatzi Kaddish.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, Be'alma divrach yirteh v'yamlich malchuteh, B'chayechon u'vyomechon, u'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, Bagala, u'bizman kariv v'yimeru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach, Li'olam olam ve'almaya yitbarach, yitbarach ve'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yi'uram v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'alev v'yithalal shmei kudisha brichu le'elam min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran v'alma v'yimeru. Amen.
Friday night Amidah is a silent Amidah. It begins on page 47 and continues on through to page 52. And you may be seated when you have completed your document.
Ose Shalom Bimromav. Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu. Ve'al Kol Yisrael. V'imru, Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael. V'imru,
Amen. We're going to continue on page 53 with the repetition of the Amidah. Please rise as you are able.
Vayachulu hashamayim v'haaretz v'chol tzevam vayachol Elohim bayom hashvi'i melakto asher asa vayishbot bayom hashvi'i mikol melakto asher asa vayevarech Elohim et yom hashvi'i vayikadesh oto Kivo Shabbat Mikol Melakto Asher Bara Elohim Lasot Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Velohei Avotenu V'Imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzhak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanara El Elyon Konei Shamayim Va'aretz.
You may be seated.
Magen Avot Bidvaro Mechaye Metim B'Ma'amaro Ha'el HaKadosh She'en Kamohu Hameniach Le'amo B'Yom Shabbat Kodesho Kivam Ratzah L'Haniach Lahem Kivam Ratzah L'Haniach Lahem L'fanav Na'avod B'yirav Ahad V'nodeh Lishmo B'chol Yom Tamid Me'ein HaBrachot El HaHodaot Adon HaShalom Mekadesh HaShabbat U'Marech Shvi'i U'Meniach B'Kedusha Le'amidu Shnei Oneg Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Ritzei B'Minuchatenu Kashenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein chelkenu b'toratecha. Savenu b'tuvecha, v'samchenu b'shuatecha. V'tacher libeinu, le'ovtecha v'emet, v'hadhileinu. Adonai Eloheinu, b'yahava uvratzon, Shabbat Kodshecha, v'yanuchu v'Yisrael, mekadeshei shemecha. Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh haShabbat.
We continue with Kadesh Shalem on page 54.
Yikravit Kashmei Rabba, Bilma Divrach Yortevia, Mlich Machute, Bechayachon of Yomechon, Uchayedecho Bet Yisrael, Bagala Uvizman Kri Vimaru. Amen. Yehesh Shmei Rabba Mevorach, Liolam Lol Me'ol Maya Yitbarach. Yitbarach Vishtabach Vitbar Vitram Vit Nasevit, Hadar Vit Alevit Halal Shmei Kudisha, Brichu, Le'ela Mikol Barata Vashirata, Tishbechata Vinechamata, Damiram Yama Vimaru. Amen. Tid Kabal Tzotachon Uva Utachon, Dechol Yisrael, Kadam Avachon Dishmaya Vimaru. Amen. Yehesh Lama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'hayim Elenu Vil Kol Yisrael Vimaru. Amen. Ose Shalom B'Ramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom. Aleinu Vil Kol Yisrael, Vil Kol Yoshvei Tevel. Ve'imru.
Amen. We're going to continue with Kiddush on page 55. If there are any students in the room on the path to B-Mitzvah under the age of 13, they are welcome to join us. Eli, you stay as you are. I'm going to mask so that I can help other folks with beverages. But we'll just take a minute to get situated here. See a couple coming. Somebody's getting a full one. See if you can get it. I don't hear the pitter-patter of little feet coming downstairs, so
I think others are staying up there.
we're ready in case. Please, and please reference thank you.
We might be getting one. I believe. Yeah, I think we got one.
Oh,
Yeah, we
there's
got
the
one.
pitter-patter.
There's the pitter-patter.
They're just like, oh, we didn't know we got Jews. Come on. All right, go ahead, start whenever you're ready.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshad b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, b'shabbat kodsho v'yava uvratzon hinilanu, zikaron l'maseh v'reishit, ki hu yom tehila Lemikrai Kodesh, Zeher Letziat Mitzrayim, Kivanu Vaharta, Yotanu Kidashta, Mikol Ohamim, Vishabat Kodshecha, V'yahava Uvratzon, Hinchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Continue our service with Elenu on page 56.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateit gedula leotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kuyoye haratzot, v'lo samanu k'mishbehot hadama, shelo sam helkenu kahem, b'gor aleinu kehol hamonam, nachnu korim, umushtachavim umodim, Lifnei Melech, Malkei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kakatu b'toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar, v'haya Adonai, le'melech al kol haaretz, v'yom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad.
If you are mourning or observing a yard site, please remain standing for the mourner's Kaddish on page 58. Everyone else may be seated. Page 58. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehe Shmei Rabba Mevarach Leolam Omei Amaya. Yit Barach, V'yit Tabach, V'yit Pa'ar, V'yit Romam, V'yit Naseh, V'yit Adar, V'yit Aleh, V'yit Halal, Shemei Dekudesha, Brechu, Le'elah Min Kol Berchata V'shirata, Tush Bechata V'nechemata, Damiran V'alma V'imru, Amen. Yehe Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom Ben Romav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. All right, well, before we conclude our service, I have a few announcements. There's a holiday this week, in case you missed that. So we've got a lot of Purim happening. So our Hamantash and Baking Marathon is happening Sunday, this coming Sunday, the 13th, from noon to 5. You can drop in anytime during the day to the social hall next door. And we usually let folks bake 2 dozen Hamantashen, and a dozen goes home with you and a dozen stays here to leave for our community Purim celebrations. We supply everything. You just supply the elbow grease. On Wednesday, March 16th, we start our evening at 6:30 with a Purim family service with singing and an abbreviated chanting from the Megillah. Bring your noisemakers, voices, everything. And then we continue at 7:30 with our full Megillah reading and Purim spiel, and this year it is all about West Side Story without the cute dresses, because it's not me. Purim Palooza, come back on Thursday. We're not done. Purim Palooza is Thursday, March 17th from 4 to 7. There's also like this other weird holiday that has to do with the color green, but I don't know that we're going to do anything with that. We've got food trucks, games, bingo, gaga, arm painting, and Pause for Life with a pop-up adoption site, music, photo booth, and more. It's helpful for Purim Palooza to register on the website that you're coming, just so we know how many supplies to have on hand, but you don't really have to. And then I have a special note here. Guests of the Gartenberg Bar Mitzvah are reminded of the venue change. The celebration tomorrow night will take place here at Beth Meyer Synagogue and not outdoors at the JCC, but the food is still outside. Yes, right. And Leslie says you're welcome, because I didn't want to pull out my winter coat. All right, so we're going to continue and conclude our service tonight with Yigdal on page 62.
Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach nimtza v'ein eit el metziuto echad v'ein yachid ki Yehudo nelam v'gan eluf lechaduto ein lo demut haguf v'ein o guf Lo na'aroch elav kedushato kadmon l'chol davar asher nivra rishon ve'ein reshit l'reshito hino adon olam v'chol notzar yoreg gedulato u'malchuto shefan nevuato netano El anshe segulato v'tifarto lo kam b'Yisrael k'Moshe od naviu mit et munato Torah met Natan le'amoel al yad navio neman beito lo yahalif ha'el v'lo yamir dato Leolamim lezulato, Sofeva Yodea starteinu, Mabit lesof davar bekadmato, Go Elishesed, Kimi falo, Notain l'rashara karishato, Yishlach l'ket yamin v'sheinu, Livdot mechakeket Yeshuato, Metim v'hayel, Beruch hasto, Baruch adayam, Shem tehilato, Metim v'hayel, Beruch hasto, Baruch adayam, Shem tehilato.
Shabbat Shalom. Please join us in the courtyard right outside the front doors under the tent for what I imagine will be a delicious oneg. Mask.